Hey everyone, welcome to WittCode, where in this video I'm going to show you how to connect an Express application with the CSS preprocessor SASS to allow for the use of SASS and SCSS files in your Express project. So first, what is SASS? Well, SASS, or Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets, is a CSS preprocessor scripting language. SASS adds special features to CSS such as variables, nesting rules, and mix-ins. And the goal of SASS is to make styling a web page simpler and more efficient. And SASS also has two syntax options, SCSS and SASS. So in other words, SASS is a CSS precompiler, but it is also a syntax. And now what about SCSS? Well, SCSS, or Sassy Cascading Style Sheets, is a syntax for SASS that also adds additional functionality to CSS such as variables, nesting, and mix-ins. And SCSS is compiled into CSS by the SASS precompiler. And so now what about SASS versus SCSS? Well, there are two syntaxes available for SASS, SCSS and SASS. And SASS is an older syntax that uses indentation to indicate nesting and new lines to separate properties, while SCSS uses brackets to indicate nesting and semicolons to separate properties. And files using SCSS have an .SCSS extension, while files using SASS have a .SASS extension. However, both of these syntaxes need the SASS precompiler to work, and both syntaxes in the end result in the creation of CSS. And then so real quick, just what is Express? Well, Express is a back-end web application framework for Node that is designed to make building web applications easier. But so, enough of the background. To get started, all we have is a folder right here called Express and SASS. And to get started, let's first initialize this as an npm project by typing an npm init and then -y. And so this command will create a package.json file at the top level of our application. And a package.json file, which was just created here, contains information about our project, including dependencies, npm scripts, and other information. And now let's go ahead and install Express. So with npm install Express. So Express is simply an npm package, so we can install it from the npm repository, which of course we do with npm install. And then we can also install SASS as an npm package from the npm repository. So that's just npm install SASS like that. So now we've got our two dependencies listed here. But so the SASS npm package provides access to the SASS executable, which will eventually compile our SCSS and SASS files. And now let's create an npm script to run our application. So we need to set up some npm scripts to run our application and also compile our SCSS and SASS files. And an npm script is a way to bundle commands and automate tasks such as compiling SASS or SCSS, creating a custom build of a project, starting our server for development, just things of that sort. And scripts are always defined under the script key in our package.json file. So right here we only have one script called test that essentially just echoes that message it had. But let's create an npm script to compile our SCSS and SASS files. Because remember, SCSS and SASS files are compiled into CSS before being inserted into the DOM. And we will compile our SCSS and SASS files using this following script. We're going to call it SCSS watch, and then we're going to pass SASS, which is an executable. We're going to provide no source map, and then we're going to do watch styles-main.scss, and I'll explain all this in a second. And then also public-css-main.css. So this command here will run our SASS precompiler. It'll telling it also to watch for changes in styles-main.scss, and when it notices changes, compile the SCSS code into a file called main.css inside the folder public. And we also pass this option here, no source map, so that SASS doesn't generate any source maps. And a source map essentially links each line in the CSS output file to its corresponding SCSS source file, and we just don't really need that in this project. But real quickly, let's create those folders and files. So over here, we have, public, and then in public we have CSS. So this is where our CSS files will go. And then we also have styles. And in here, let's create main.scss. Because remember, our npm script in here SCSS watch, or actually let me call it SASS watch. This here is looking for changes inside styles.main.scss, so this file here, and when it sees some, it will compile main.scss into main.css and place it here. But now let's start writing some SCSS. So what we're going to do is let's just declare a variable, and I'm going to call it dark red, and we're going to set it to RGB 139, which is basically the weight of the red color, 35, the weight of the green color, and 35 again, the weight of the blue color. And then what we're going to do also is set any h1 tags. We'll set their color, which essentially means their text color, to be this dark red. And actually, let's run our npm SASS script. So if you can see, this will run this command we have here. And let's run npm SASS watch. Sorry, I just did, once again, I messed up. We do npm run SASS watch like this. And right away, we can see SASS is watching for changes, compiled main.scss to public css.main.css. And if we go in here, what do you see? We can see that this variable dark red has been compiled into its color. And this is the hex value, as you can see by the hashtag here, and then the 6 digits and letters. But so that's all we need to get up our SASS and SCSS up and running. So now let's create an Express application. And this application will serve the static CSS file main.css. So to begin, let's create an index.js file at the top level of our application and then import Express into it. So let's make a file called index.js, and we're going to do const express equals require express. Now let's create an Express application and let's capture it inside a variable called app. So we just execute this, which will create an Express application. And now we want Express to serve our compiled CSS files to the client. And to do this, we have to register some middleware with Express. And to do that, we use the dot, or for some global middleware, we use .use. And then we can pass the middleware express.static, and then let's also import a module, a global module in Node called path, so we don't have to install it, it's global, it's already there. And then we're going to call path.join underscore dir name, and then public like this. And so this right here, app.use static, and then express.static, adds a global middleware for serving static files from our Express application. So express.static is a middleware, and we pass the folder location of the static files we want to serve into express.static. And we use path.join, which will essentially join dir name, which means current directory, with public. And the reason we do this is because public has our CSS files and our static files that we want to serve up. And now let's go into our public here. Let's create another folder called HTML. And in here, we're going to create an HTML file called index.html that will link our compiled CSS file. So inside this, let's do an exclamation mark as a shortcut. And then let's link first let's actually create an h1 that will be colored from that color that we made, and we'll do connected to compiled CSS file like this, and then we have to do a link tag, and the relation of this link tag is a style sheet, because if I spelled that right, yep, because it's a CSS file, and then the href, or the location, will be css-main.css like this. And so notice how we omit the public directory from the path to our main.css file. Well, this is because we registered public as the root of our static files middleware. So in here, we have public, so all we need to specify now, because it'll be serving static files from this public directory, we just have to specify CSS and then main.css. And so let's go back into our Express, to our server, and we will serve our index.html file from an HTTP GET request to the root of our application. So we'll register a root here, pass in request and response like this. And to serve a file to the user with Express, we use the method sendFile and pass it the path to the file. So we'll do response and then sendFile. And once again, we're going to use path, join the current directory, and this time it'll be public-html-index.html. And now let's bind our Express application to a port. So to do that, we use app.listen, and we're going to listen on port 1234. And so a port is basically a virtual entity within an operating system that helps computers sort network traffic. So essentially, network traffic directed to our application will be directed at port 1234. And so now we've created one, back in our package.json file, we've created one npm script, but we want to create another one. So let's create a npm script called Nodemon watch. And this script here will run our Express application and also restart the server whenever a file is changed. And so to do this, we're going to use the package Nodemon index.js, and we're going to specify -e and then star, which means whenever there are changes in our index.js file, or whenever there are changes in any file, we will restart our index.js, which essentially means we will restart our server, and then everything will be loaded with all the new changes. So let's also, if you don't have Nodemon installed globally, you can use npm install save dev Nodemon. And what this will do is it'll install Nodemon as a development dependency, because we wouldn't need it in a live production environment, which is what we need these dependencies for. But for a development dependency, we don't need that. So we have now Nodemon under dev dependencies. And so now we have two npm scripts, one to run our Express application and one to compile our SCSS files. But we want a way to run both of these scripts at once. In other words, whenever a change is made to a SCSS file, we want SASS to compile it to CSS, and we then want our Nodemon server to restart. And we can do this, run both these commands by using an npm package called, sorry, let me run this. We'll save it as a dev dependency, but it is called npm run all. Save dev. But so this package npm run all is a command line interface tool that allows us to run multiple npm scripts sequentially or in parallel. And we tag on save dev once again because we need this package for development, but not for production, but we have it here. So now let's create an npm run all script. And we're just going to call this one dev. And then we will say npm run all, which will be our command. And in parallel, we want to run SCSS watch, and then Nodemon watch. So we want both of these running essentially at the same time. But so this above command will run our SASS watch and Nodemon watch commands in parallel. So now whenever we change an SCSS file, our SCSS watch script will compile it to CSS, and then our Nodemon watch script will restart our server with the new CSS files. So now let's just ensure that everything is working correctly. I'm going to run npm run dev, which will run this script, which will then run both of these in parallel. So now if you look, we have SASS is watching for changes, and also Nodemon is looking for changes on all file extensions because of this -e star. And if we go here, and I believe it was localhost 1234, there we go. We get connected to compiled CSS file. And that comes from that color. So now if we go here, let's change this just to blue. And it's still called dark red, but we see, you could see this refresh in here. And now if we go back, refresh the page, we can see it's blue. So now we've got our SASS, or SCSS, SASS compiler, all this up and running. with an Express application. But there we have it. So Express is a very powerful backend framework, and SASS makes compiling a web page much simpler. And so combining the two is a great idea. But anyway, I want to thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing, and I hope to see you in the next video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. And also, I have the code for this on my website, and there'll be a link for that in the description if you want to check that out. Thank you. Have a good one.